What is up, everyone, and welcome back to the Ratchet Motors YouTube channel. So while we wait for a few more parts to finish up that 96 Triumph Thunderbird, we're waiting for a couple of the fork seals, and I'll put a link to all of our playlists for that right here. While we're waiting for that, it's time to get this big block Ford fired up. So if you haven't seen it already, I'll put a link to our latest haul here of this chassis and big block Ford with our C6. But what you're looking at here is a 460 Ford big block, and it's about time we get it fired up. So just from initial inspection here, I know it is a D1 VE block. We see that on the short block. In my last video, I thought it was actually a D2 VE. But that was actually on a timing chain cover. It wasn't on the actual block itself. On the actual block itself, and I can actually show that, I think, over here. Let's see, where did we find it? I'll get a light on there and we'll see it in a little bit. But this is a D1 VE, and I finally want to get this all fired up here. So we know we have a Wyand Stealth intake manifold, an HEI distributor, Edelbrock 750 carb. What I don't know at all is what heads we have here. So I looked before and I thought I was going to see the head castings, the casting markings somewhere on the block here, or sorry, on the heads here, but nothing is to be found. I don't know if they ground them down or what is going on. And I looked on both sides. We have no head markings here. So as far as my order of operations, I'm going to start by trying to figure out a little bit more about these heads. I'm going to pull the valve covers. I'm going to pull the spark plugs. We'll look at the heads. We'll hopefully figure out what pistons we have in here. He did mention, the previous owner did mention that we have some type of overboard pistons in here as well. So we're going to open some things up a little bit. We'll actually start with the spark plugs and then go into the valve covers. Start figuring out exactly what we're working with here. Then at some point I'll pull the distributor so I can prime the oil system. After obviously checking and refilling the fluids, we'll prime the oil system. And then hopefully, after we've confirmed everything's good as far as maybe checking all the rockers, making sure we can prime the oil system, we'll try to give it a first fire up. So tune in. All right, now that we got those spark plugs out, and those are on there pretty tight. Now that we get them out, I'm going to try this bore scope out that I got on Amazon. It was only $20, so my expectations are pretty low. But I'll put the link in the description, and I'll try to see if there's a way I can share it. So I actually am just going to plug this into my phone. We see it's got like a USB-C connector. So I'm going to try to plug this into my phone and see. There's some recommended apps. And if there's any footage I can share, I'll make sure I can. I'm just going to check and see if I can get an eye on what kind of pistons we have here and see if we have any anything of concern, like any pistons that are damaged, of course, or even just any scoring on the cylinder walls or anything like that. So we'll take a quick peek just as a sanity check here. And again, I'll share anything if I can, Or maybe even if I can't figure out a way to share it, then I'll like double up with my GoPro or something. So tune in, we'll see how those pistons look and those cylinders. Okay, so the borescope actually worked out pretty good. So I'm going to add the footage after this. But what we noticed, or I should say what I noticed, is it appears to be a 40 over piston. So the pistons are actually relatively new looking. That would make this a 468, so just a little more displacement. Just what I can see, I think they're a sealed power hyperuretic or whatever the term is. But let me know what you guys think in the comments. I'm just basing that off of what I can see on, basically what I can find on Google searching. So let me know what you guys think. That would be nice because at least it's a little, I mean, it's still a stock style, but it's a 40 over, a slight upgrade there. So from here, I'm going to pull the valve covers and take a look in there and see if everything looks sound, if everything looks okay. Make sure all the rockers are tight. I also don't know really what type of cam is in here, so let me know if there's any quick ways I can take a check or figure out the cam without tearing anything apart here. But we'll go ahead, we'll pull the valve covers, and we'll do our next kind of assessment on this motor. All right, so this is the first side over, the driver's side, you would say, the valve covers. Everything looks pretty okay here. So I know a couple things to identify the heads are these, the screw-in, I guess, the screw-in rocker pedestals. So someone let me know, what type of heads am I looking at here? Again, this is a 460 big block. We have a D1VE short block. Is this just, are these D1VE heads? Please let me know because I am not aware of any of this. I also don't know what's going on as far as our camshaft, as I mentioned. But we'll go ahead. We're going to go to the other side as well here. Just make sure everything looks okay. Nothing was extra loose. There was a couple that seemed to have the lash set here, as I would expect. But otherwise, things are looking pretty good here. So we'll go to the passenger side next, and hopefully no surprises. So far, smooth sailing. It even has oil in it, which is really nice. I just see oil on the dipstick, but I can see oil all the way up to the head. So that kind of confirms that at least the motor was primed. Or I was told that it was ran just briefly, which is kind of lining up here. But again, we'll check everything before we drain the oil and kind of give it a shot ourselves. All right, got the other head open here. Pretty much the same. No markings anywhere to be identified. Again, I think it would be like right here, but we're not seeing anything. I do see forward, it looks like there, and what appears to be like a CP upside down on the head. But other than that, I can't find any other markings here. So let me know what you all think, because I'm depending on you guys on this one. All right, everything was going smooth up to this point. Everything's been looking good. But now going to drain the oil here, we can see, if you look very closely, that is our oil drain plug right there, and it's right on top of the cross member. So that's not going to work long term. This is going to make oil changes very difficult. So I'm looking into getting a rear sump pan. But for now, I think I'm just going to let it be messy and drain it out here. This is the one thing I wasn't looking forward to now that I see this here. But we're just going to hopefully drain it all out into our large drain pan there. And then we can replace our oil, make sure we add in our zinc additive. We'll pull the distributor to check for oil pressure. And assuming everything's fine there, we're pretty close to giving this a test fire. All right, so let's see how this draining oil works out. So that wasn't too bad, just a little messy. So you can see it goes right into a hole in the cross member, and actually there's another hole at the bottom of the cross member where you can see kind of this stream on the left coming from, where it's actually leaking through. So that's why I have the car up on a jack stand on one side here to kind of have it all angled. I can zoom out a little bit. You can see I have it on a jack stand here, so I have everything angled, and it's just running off into that hole. So I'm just gonna let everything drip off until it's done dripping. The oil actually looks really good, which is nice. Kind of regret doing this a little bit just because it looks like it's brand new oil in there, but not a problem. So it's good to check everything. So once this is all done dripping away here, we'll clean it up. We'll put the drain plug back in, refill with oil, and then we'll go about checking our pressure. All right, so we got the oil all topped off here. We added our zinc additive as well, because I'm not exactly sure what cam is in here, but assuming it's a stock cam, we're gonna need zinc additive because I didn't get any special oil. And it's kind of good that I didn't pay for any extra special oil, because most likely we'll be draining it very soon when we go to swap that oil pan. But we're just really worried about a fire up here to make sure everything's working. Before I go ahead and pull that distributor here to prime the oil pump, I'm actually gonna look at my transmission real quick. Now you can see if we look closely, I have my transmission lines for how we go to our transmission cooler. And right now I don't have one, obviously, because I don't have one installed or anything really figured out for that yet. But what I'm going to do for the time being is just create a loop between those lines, just because I want to make sure I have fluid in the transmission before I try the startup. And fluid might leak out of those two ports if there is any in there. So I'm going to make sure I just have a loop there. Now this would not be permanent by any means. This is just for startup. I'm definitely going to have a transmission cooler, but just for ease right now, I'm going to just loop that inline, kind of just make a loop between the inlet and the outlet before I go ahead and top off any other fluids and then prime that oil pump before the startup. So just a quick little, we'll pull the two fittings that I have. I'll make a new hard line between them and just pop them right back on. And I just realized I have a bunch of 5/16 hard lines spare from an earlier project. So this is gonna be perfect to just quickly, we have a nice little flaring tool here, hydraulic flaring tool, because I've made a lot of brake lines and clutch lines in the past. So I can use this flaring tool and again, just make a quick loop so we don't have to worry about a transmission cooler for this time. So we'll get that done real quick here. So first flare came out not too bad here. We're just reusing the fitting. Again, just making some simple flares using our flaring tool. We'll do the other one on camera here once we have this measured out. right, so things are actually coming along really well here, actually surprisingly well. So the last thing I have on my checklist here is to pull this distributor and prime our oil system. So I'm gonna pull the distributor. It's a HEI distributor, so it's pretty simple. I'm just gonna mark all of the different orientations, probably more than I need to using a Sharpie. Previous owner claimed that it fired up, so I'm gonna hope that the timing is pretty close. I'll mark everything accordingly. We'll pull the whole distributor, and then I'm gonna try to use a probably a socket, some kind of extension, and actually turn my oil pump shaft so I can check for oil pressure. And in the back of our motor, you can kind of see it there in the background. I actually got an oil pressure gauge or an oil pressure test system. It really just is connected to our standard pressure port there in the back. And we'll just have a gauge to actually make sure we have real oil pressure here. So again, just gonna start by pulling the distributor, do our best to make sure that oil pump gear, or the oil pump shaft, I should say, doesn't fall out or anything or fall into our oil pan. Hopefully this is pretty straightforward, but this is the last step that we could run into any obstacles. So we'll just see how it goes. All right, so we got the cap off here, and like I mentioned, just adding in a couple markings here so we can capture our timing. So I made sure I think this is my rotor is lined up with my main body, and I also added just a little marking. We actually have, there's a little, if you look closely, it's a little hard to see here. There's actually a small little gap here in that coolant switch or that coolant temperature gauge. I think this is for my coolant temperature. There's actually a little notch in that, which just happens to line up perfectly. So we have all of our alignment here. I'm not going to remove this at all. So we'll go ahead now and we'll pull this distributor. Again, you have to be really careful to make sure that that oil pump shaft doesn't stick with the distributor and then potentially fall out into the oil pan. So this is going to be probably the most sensitive part where we actually have to be very cautious, because if that falls in the oil pan, then we're going to be pulling that that oil pan a lot sooner than we want to here. So we'll just be really cautious, take our time with this. Hopefully we can get everything out pretty simply. Just need to loosen up our nut that actually keeps the distributor down. And hopefully from there, we can actually just prime the system and put everything back together and hear our first fire up. So actually, so far so good. If you look very closely there, and it's a little hard on my camera here, you can see the oil pump shaft stayed right in place. No issues there. I might need to actually jack up the car a little bit to get the shaft straight so it's easier to put a socket on it. But at this point, we can actually use that to prime our oil system. As I mentioned, on the back of the motor here, I have a little port. This would usually be your pressure switch or your pressure sender, but I went on Amazon and bought this kit. I have my distributor cap on here right now, but I bought a kit that actually just quick releases onto that, so we can measure our pressure as we actually try to prime the system here. So I'm going to get right onto that. I'm pretty excited. This has all been going as smooth as possible. I'm actually really happy. It seems like the previous owner was honest up to this point. Seems like everything was put together pretty well and with consideration. So hopefully we continue on this smooth path and we can hear this thing fire up with just those two cherry bombs over there. All right, let's give it a shot. We got our gauge right here. See if I can put it somewhere where maybe y'all can see it too. So, maybe something like that. Yeah, cool. So this is 0. Let's see. The red is PSI, so this is 0. I'm hoping to see at least 30. I'm not exactly sure what we're shooting for here, but I'll look it up. But I'm hoping at least 30 to start, because I know that's at least some kind of oil pressure. And remember, always, I researched, this is going to be reverse rotation. So let's see what happens. Just give it a shot here. Ooh, went up to 10. That's good news. Now this isn't the best drill for this dog here. 30. Oh, okay. Let's see. Let me take this out of here. So went right up to 30. Let me do a little research real quick and I'll get back to everyone. I think 30 is pretty good. I'm gonna try a different drill here real quick, just to see if we can get a little more oil pressure just for the sake of it. Ooh, we're getting at least 60 there. I'm really happy with that. We're gonna fire this up. I'm feeling really good about this. All right, it's finally that time. So we got a filter plumbed in for our carburetor here. We got a battery charging with our ground and our starter leads. And we got a nice safe fuel jug here. We know it can prime oil. So let's give it a shot and see if we can get a little fire here. Now it might pretty cool. Let's try it again. Might as well. Sounds good. All right, so that's really everything we have for this one here. I am super excited to hear that 460 fire up. I hope everyone else enjoyed that as well. Now that we know we have a good, healthy motor, it means we can really move forward with the project, which the next step is going to be getting our actual 62 in here and slowly moving the body onto this chassis here. I probably will change out the oil pan, but other than that, we're ready to get the body on this frame here. So I hope everyone enjoyed what they saw here. Be sure to share with your friends, like if you like what you saw, subscribe for more content, and hope to see you again soon.